That's right. So we see that the openings actually started in the same way as we saw Magnus Carlsen's last game. White started by pushing his pawn forward in front of his queen, and we see Magnus Carlsen has developed a knight early in the game. White also bringing a knight out into the board, towards the centre of the board. The opening is all about that centre. And actually, we've seen Magnus Carlsen do something that I've nearly never seen him play before. A very rare opening. We call this the King's Indian defence. And this one, we call it a defence, but actually it's played when black wants to win, when you want a really tense game. Not many trades will happen. White, we see that, is occupying the centre with all of his pawns. White's 3 pawns there in the centre of the board. That means that white normally has control. White will have more space a bit later on. Black is just aiming to keep the tension, make the opponent nervous a bit later on. Very, very interesting stuff. We also see that black has castled his king. Black's brought his king to safety and now finally counters in the centre of the board.
And we talked about that a lot in the last game. Pawns supporting pawns. You wanted the pawns to come on and support the pawns. Magnus just, okay, well, now he's traded one off.
Wow. Yeah, he has chosen a line that perhaps he is not so used to playing, because I've actually seen Wesley be very cutthroat in this opening and go for the kill. But here he has, like you said, traded pawns, and now we see a trade of queens. And now this bishop has been developed to pin that knight to the rook.
That's white. That's right. That's also white. If we bring up, I can't talk today. There's something wrong with me. If we bring up the board, we can see the last few moves. There have been a few trades, and we will likely see more trades. So in this position, a very tense position, there's plenty of moves. White has many, many options. White could castle the king, develop his bishop. Instead, he decided to go for a safe option. This shows to me that Wesley So is in the mood for a draw. He tries to trade the queens. Those queens leave the board, and now he jumps his bishop out. As Jovanka mentioned, this bishop does a great job. Kind of X-ray vision again. White, the black knight cannot move because this rook behind it would be attacked. Therefore, black decided, okay, it's time to shuffle this rook across, get out of that line of vision. And now a set of knights have been traded. White's central pawn here is very, very strong. Therefore, Magnus Carlsen trying to get rid of that pawn, and Wesley So jumping with his bishop forward. White's bishops look fantastic right now. Bit of, well, supreme control, really, by those bishops over some key squares. And Magnus Carlsen, it will depend on whether he's familiar with this position. This position has a reputation of being quite solid for black, being quite decent for black, but with best play, it should be a draw. So I think Wesley, he's just testing Magnus. He's keeping that draw in hand. He's keeping that safety latch on. He's just saying to Magnus, if you don't know your stuff, I'll punish you. If you do know your stuff, we'll just make a draw.
Exactly. No, I like this philosophy, actually, because like you said, Magnus rarely plays this opening. I don't think I've seen him it must be a handful of times that he's played something like this. And this isn't the most popular.
We saw a yawn on Wesley So's face there. We have to remember it's only 8 or 9 o'clock where he is sitting, a.m.
Yes, it is early in the morning. And yeah, but, I think we saw that Wesley actually did very well playing in the morning. So perhaps he's a morning person. And Magnus, of course, not playing in an unknown location. So
yeah, I actually talked to Wesley about coffee, because he told me he loves coffee, but he never drinks coffee when he's playing a chess tournament, because he feels he gets too much energy from it. He gets anxious. So we know for sure that Wesley hasn't drinking coffee today, even if it's early in the morning for him.
Maybe that explains his kind of calm, very calm demeanour, calm style on the board as well. And yeah, we do see a very calm position right now. Queens have left. White's pieces nicely centralised. White did retreat his knight there. He's aiming for a slightly more active square a bit later on. Normally, the only reason these top guys, these top players, they ever retreat is if the piece is on the way to a better square. So, yeah, I kind of like what Wesley's doing, but I think Magnus, he will be frustrated. He'll be so disappointed that he hasn't got a really kind of dynamic, kind of double-edged fight that he was aiming for when he played this opening that isn't normally part of his repertoire.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually just look at his expression. he's so expressive, isn't he? Just, he's not happy. This wasn't really part of the deal that he wanted. He wanted a kind of cutthroat game. He's not getting that. So, yes, now he just has to first of all, equalise and then play for what happens.
That's right, and with his last move, we see on the board there, Magnus Carlsen, he's just brought his bishop forward, challenging White's light-squared bishop. Those bishops are likely to leave the board over the next 2 or 3 moves. The pieces are slowly starting to disappear. I slightly prefer White's position just because the black bishop the black dark squared bishop next to the black king, that bishop's actually blocked by its own pawn at the moment. So that piece is not going to be very active, at least for the foreseeable future. But if the rooks leave the board, if everything else gets traded off, just the fact that the pawn structure is almost symmetrical, it's going to be very hard for either side to win. Neither side will be able to create a passed pawn and get pawn to the end of the board. That's one of the only ways to win, actually, once the queens leave. Once checkmate is unlikely. And there we see the bishops are traded off. I think this one is edging slightly closer to the draw.
Already?
Yeah,
there's still a lot of life.
There's definitely still a lot of life, but definitely there's a kind of, if you can see, there's no kind of pawn majorities on either side of the board, so it's going to be tricky to kind of create a pass pawn. It all depends now on who can mobilize their pieces in the best way. And both sides actually have very active pieces.
And we are getting some photos on Instagram. Wow, I like that last photo of that kid playing chess. Fantastic.
Yes.
I hope this board, I mean, I hope it was someone's Christmas present. That
looked
beautiful.
impressive, didn't it?
All right, we do see some moves, and I'm noticing that Wesley hasn't castled yet.
That's right. So Wesley has kept his king in the middle of the board. Sometimes, especially once the queens have left, as we saw in that last game with 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬, sometimes the king's actually better in the middle. If it won't be in danger, if a checkmate won't happen, then kings can be great when they're centralized. So Magnus Carlsen, with this last move, offering a trade of rooks. We've seen the queens leave the board. We've seen a pair of bishops, a pair of knights. We will see a pair of rooks leave the board soon. I expect Wesley actually not to castle his king. I expect Wesley to just shuffle his king forward one square, connecting the white rooks. White's rook on the bottom right-hand corner there. It's not doing anything. He needs to get that in the game.
Yeah, and in fact, this position, it's been seen before, played about 10 times.
Really?
Yes.
Even after 18 moves?
Even after 18 moves, it has
wow.
been. But OK, now we are in new territory. No one has ever shuffled their king forward. This is new.
Yeah, I think it might be new, but it's not a kind of groundbreaking discovery.
No.
And I think actually the fact that this position's been seen before, it's reflected in the clock times. Both players, they've played so quickly. They've both still got 14 minutes on the clock. Quite possibly they've studied this exact position before, or at least something very similar. And yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Wesley So. He won the Skilling Open. He's a fantastic player, but sometimes I just think with White, a bit more ambition might elevate him to that very top level to compete with Magnus Carlsen for World Championship titles. This game, it does look like it's about to fizzle out.
There's simply nothing anyone can do to sort of...
It's just very balanced. Both players have the same kind of formation of pieces. The pawn structure is symmetrical.
Yeah, and we're going to see a trade of rooks, and now Wesley has advanced one of his queenside, his left pawns on the left side of the board forward, and yeah.
Yeah, now that black bishop, I mentioned that bishop was blocked in. That was the only bad thing about black's position. And now Magnus Carlsen, he's sorted out that problem. Black's piece, the bishop retreats, but that bishop has a very nice long diagonal to just to have some fun on. I think that black bishop will try and jump forward at some point. Wesley, meanwhile, needs to improve that white rook in the bottom right corner. It's just doing nothing right now. It needs to enter the game somehow.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about this is that the players cannot offer a draw. They have to, yes, they have to play 30 moves, and then if they're going to agree a draw, it's going to be done by repeating the position 3 times. So this is actually really nice, because normally the players could go draw and they'll go, yep, and then they would carry on to the next game. But this way, you know, they have to play it out, and sometimes people make mistakes.
True.
And
or mouse flips.
Yes. Or trigger happy hand moves.
Yeah.
At least Magnus, he's traded off the queens already, so we won't see a repeat of the last event where he mouse slipped a whole queen. This time, if he mouse slips, it won't be as bad.
Yeah, he actually got off to a great start in this tournament compared to the last one, where he lost the first game with a mouse slip. That was a horrible start for him. He did come back strong. A bit of a different start for the world champion today. He started with a draw and might also do a draw in the second round here.
That's right. And actually, traditionally, he's quite a slow starter. We saw last event, but it's just a trend throughout his whole career. He often loses one of his first couple of games, but then maybe that just gives him the motivation to fight harder in the rest. And I think a draw against Levon Aronian, against Wesley So, 2 of his strongest rivals, I think they will. He'll be relatively happy. He won't be too disappointed. Obviously, killer mode. He wants to activate it, but saving it for the knockout stages is equally viable. Meanwhile, Wesley so just retreats his bishop. White's bishop, knight, and king there, nicely coordinated, all defending each other. I do expect Magnus Carlsen to maybe move his knight, maybe jump forward with his bishop. Lots and lots of choice for Magnus here. He could also just start to bring the black king closer towards the centre. Black's king doesn't need to be tucked away in the corner there. It's safe, but it would be even better in the middle of the board, controlling lots of squares.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you that king would be better in the centre. And it's just, again, I mean, it's very difficult to actually come up with a plan here because it's much more straightforward when there's like a pawn majority on one side and you're like, push, I want to make a queen. And here it's all about just improving the pieces. And there you see Magnus has now placed his bishop on a much more active square. And Wesley is now up to Wesley to find the move.
That's right. And maybe if we bring up the analysis board, we can see what both players will be thinking about right now. We've mentioned the pawn structure is roughly symmetrical. Wow, Wesley so, I chose a good moment to bring the board up. Wesley so, he's kind of gambited a pawn. He's pushed this pawn forward. It's not defended. He's attacking the black bishop. He's asking that bishop a question. Do you want to capture this knight? Do you want to capture this pawn? Do you want to run away and retreat? Knowing Magnus, he definitely doesn't want to retreat. But if he trades for this knight, I think actually maybe White's bishop is slightly stronger than the knight. Bishops are better when there's pawns on both sides of the board because they're long-range pieces. The bishop can control the right, control the left. The black knight, it's a very short-range piece. It can only it takes a long time. It takes 3-4 moves to jump over to the other side. So I think this wouldn't favour Magnus Carlsen. But if he gets greedy, if he grabs a pawn, then we see the idea behind Wesley So's move. This rook, which was doing nothing the whole game, can now swing across, attacking this bishop. And suddenly, again, I keep using this phrase, but X-ray, once this bishop moves, White's rook will capture a pawn on the left side here, and White's rook would suddenly go from the worst piece on the board to the best piece. So I think this is something that Wesley is hoping for and that Magnus should avoid.
So we're going to be interested to see what Magnus chooses for his next move here. Probably shouldn't move his black bishop then to trade off or to take that pawn.
That's right. I definitely wouldn't capture the pawn as black right now. Trading the bishop for the knight, I don't think it's a huge mistake. It should still be fine. But it's just not something that he maybe wanted, Magnus Carlsen, with his last move. I just think that's incredibly clever by Wesley. So I just didn't expect that. And I think that's why he's such a dangerous player, especially at these speed events. He sees things that others would take a much longer time to see.
Yeah, no, he's a very, very natural player, you know, and he's practically unbeatable when he wants to be. And I really love this last move because it's just asking Magnus, what are you going to do? Are you going to step back with the bishop? Are you going to take the very committal decision of taking that knight, or just kind of go, well, my last move was a mistake. I'm not too proud to retreat the bishop. And yeah, definitely for a proud person such as Magnus, I don't think he's going to find it too comfortable to kind of retreat the bishop. But it might be the best move.
That's right. And sometimes in chess, pride can be a bit of a sin. Sometimes you just got to think, OK, I might have made a mistake, but now I just got to correct that mistake, take a time out. And I mean, I think retreating here, it's not so natural. It just looks like it's lost a move for black. So maybe we'll see a bishop for knight trade. But Magnus Carlsen, this is where he will spend a bit of time. And Wesley, I mean, this is a tip for everyone at home as well. In rapid chess, just ask your opponent questions, set them small traps, kind of give them a choice of 3 or 4 moves which look roughly equal, make them spend that time doubting themselves. And that's why Wesley is so good at rapid chess.
Yeah, I kind of have an expression sometimes, you know, you got to give your opponent the ability to show their strength, and I mean that in a really negative way. So yes, and you know, like bishop taking the pawn would be a mistake, but you know, it would be tempting to someone who's greedy and goes, yeah, I think I can get away with it. You might do it. You never know what people think up.
Yeah, I love that when you guys let us know that the pieces are talking together or to themselves or to other pieces.
I think Wesley, he was definitely talking to that rook that white rook in the bottom corner there.
Yeah.
He was saying, how can I improve you? And that's why he saw this idea. Otherwise, it's just so hard to give up a pawn in a roughly kind of balanced position with queens off the board. It's so rare to kind of even see that idea.
And he definitely put Magnus in a long thinking break there with that move. So a good move by Wesley there. Is it any possibility that with that move, maybe the game will?
Oh, well,
that one move he shouldn't do.
That's right.
That was something we were not a big fan of, because suddenly, and you can see Wesley's rook has activated itself, and you can see the bar was slightly shot up, but let's not get too dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, it's not kind of a game-losing blunder. It's not going to end the game immediately, but suddenly we see also the bar agrees white is the one with the advantage now. It went from a completely level position to suddenly white having this beautiful rook in the black camp. That white rook now attacking a pawn as well. If you just compare that rook to how it looked 3 moves ago, so sad and lonely in that corner.
Magnus spent so much time thinking about that move, and he made that one move that you said instantly. So Magnus shouldn't now take this pawn, and he did. Is he a little bit rusty in the start here, Magnus Carlsen?
Ooh, I was about to say he is rusty, but Wesley So's last move was not a good one. OK, it's fine, but it just means he's going for the draw. He's just eliminated the knights.
Yeah, OK, and I think we're probably going to see a repetition of moves. The rook is going to carry on checking the king, and yep, that's it. So he had a chance just to put the pressure on Magnus, and he decided not to go for it.
That's right. I think a huge missed opportunity to just show Magnus who's boss. I mean, Wesley So, he could have just used that very active rook he had to slowly massage him, apply the pressure.
Done.